Today, we're diving into a text that's been a spiritual guide for millions for over 2,000 years, the Dhammapada. It's one of the most beloved books in the world. But what if I told you this ancient collection might be holding a secret, a really big one?
That's the big question we're tackling. We're about to go on a kind of textual detective journey, one that could seriously change how we look at a foundational piece of Buddhist literature. So, grab your magnifying glass.
So where does a puzzle like this even begin? Well, it all starts with something really strange, an anomaly in the very structure of the Dhammapada that's been hiding there for centuries, just waiting to be noticed. First, just a quick refresher for everyone. The Dhammapada is this amazing collection of the Buddhist sayings. It's got 423 verses, all neatly sorted into 26 chapters, or vagga. For generations, this structure has been seen as a core part of the text, basically set in stone.
Okay, but this is where it gets weird. The average chapter in the Dhammapada has, about 16 verses. Pretty consistent. But then you get to the very last one, chapter 26, the Brāhmaṇavagga, and it has a whopping 41. It doesn't just bend the rule, it completely shatters the pattern. To put that into perspective, this one chapter is 2.5 times longer than the average. In the world of textual analysis, that's not just a little odd, it's a massive statistical outlier. And a flare-up like that is almost never a coincidence. It's a clue.
So our first major break in the case comes from a pretty surprising place. It's not from the Dhammapada itself, but from a close relative, another ancient text from a different Buddhist tradition.
So check this out. On the left, you've got our Pali Dhammapada with its 26 chapters. On the right, its Sanskrit cousin, the Udānavarga. Now, the Udānavarga has 33 chapters, and critically, it has an entire chapter dedicated to Nirvana, the ultimate goal of Buddhism, which makes you wonder, isn't it kind of strange that the Dhammapada, one of the most important texts, is missing a dedicated chapter on the most important concept?
And the Nirvana chapter in the Udānavarga has these incredibly powerful verses that just get right to the heart of the matter. So where did all this amazing material go in the Dhammapada? The theory is, it didn't just disappear, it was hidden.
All right, so if a lost chapter on Nibbāna, that's the Pali word for nirvana, was basically merged into another one, can we find the evidence? The answer is a definite yes. You just have to look for the seams where different ideas were stitched together.
The method here is basically textual forensics. We have to go through that super long chapter 26, verse by verse, and look for any sudden, abrupt shifts in the topic. I mean, if you jam 2 different chapters together, the transition is probably not going to be all that smooth, right? For example, a huge chunk of chapter 26 uses this exact same line over and over again. It's all about defining what a true Brahmin is, someone defined by their good actions, not by their birth. That's the chapter's official theme. It's clear, it's repetitive, it makes perfect sense.
But then, bam! Right in the middle of that same chapter, you hit verses like this one. And suddenly, we're not talking about Brahmins anymore. We're talking about immersion in the deathless. That is classic textbook language for Nibbāna. The change in topic is totally jarring.
And it turns out, researchers found 2 really clear seams. You have a section about Nibbāna at the very beginning, then the main Brahmin verses in the middle, and then it switches back to Nibbāna at the ends. It looks exactly like someone took the Nibbāna verses and used them as bookends for an originally shorter separate chapter.
Now you might be thinking, okay, interesting, but couldn't this just be a one-time mistake, some ancient editing error? Well, the next piece of evidence suggests this wasn't an accident at all, but part of a bigger pattern in how these texts were put together.
Because, get this kind of thing has happened before. In the famous Lotus Sutra, which is a huge deal in Mahayana Buddhism, scholars know for a fact that one chapter used to be embedded right inside another one. It was only separated out centuries later. So there's a clear historical precedent for chapters getting merged together.
And this leads to a really fascinating question. If we perform a little textual surgery, and we separate out the hidden Nibbāna verses into their own chapter, and we do a similar split on another long chapter, we end up with a grand total of 28 chapters. So you have to ask yourself, why 28? Is that number important?
Oh, you bet it's important. The number 28 was a huge deal in the ancient world. It was considered a perfect number, mathematically. It's the number of days in a lunar cycle, which is central to the Buddhist calendar. The Lotus Sutra, as it happens, also has 28 chapters, and in the Theravada tradition, they talk about 28 past Buddhas. I mean, come on, that is way too much overlap to be a coincidence. It points to a deliberate, symbolic design.
So after all this detective work, The weirdly long chapter, the thematic themes, the clues from its cousin text, and the sheer significance of the number 28, we can finally try to reconstruct what the original Dhammapada might have actually looked like.
And here it is. This is the proposed solution. On the left, that's the text we've always known. But on the right, look what happens in the reconstruction. We split those two overly long chapters, and suddenly, not only does the length problem completely disappear, but we get a brand new dedicated chapter on Nibbāna, and the final chapter is a perfectly normal size. The whole thing becomes more balanced, more symmetrical. It just fits.
So, at this point, you might be asking yourself, all right, this is a cool puzzle, but why does rearranging some ancient chapters really matter today? Well, the implications are actually way bigger than you might think.
See, this isn't just an academic game. This discovery gives us this incredible window into how these teachings were passed down for centuries, back when it was all done orally. Knowledge wasn't just a static thing written in a book. It was shaped and organized to be easily memorized and to have a deep symbolic meaning. We're literally seeing the handprints of a living, breathing tradition.
Ultimately, in covering this hidden chapter is this amazing reminder that even the most sacred, timeless texts have a very human history, a story of how they were compiled, edited, and passed down. It invites us all to look a little closer, to question what we think we know, and it really makes you wonder what other secrets are out there, hiding in plain sight.